Okay, welcome to the PacTrans CSET Region 10 Transportation Conference of 2020. This is webinar week, so as part of the technical component of this virtual webinar, we're hosting a webinar week. We have 4 great webinars, one each day at 11 a.m. Pacific this week. Today is the first installment in webinar week. We're very excited to have you. You know what, I will just pass it on to our moderator and let him introduce the subject matter. So without further ado, Associate Professor from Oregon State University, Haizhong Wang, is going to take it away.
Thank you, Cole. Good morning, everyone, again. Let me just start by, warmly welcome everyone to the first webinar in this week. And this webinar is focusing on electric and shared micromobility. And it's really my pleasure and my privilege to host you all with our 3 excellent speakers. And today we have first one, Dr. Junfeng Jiao from University of Texas at Austin, and also Mr. Tobias Marx, who is the Parking Services Division Manager for City of Bend, Oregon. And we also have Mr. Joe Miller, Micromobility Program Lead from Seattle Department of Transportation. And what we will, logistically, we will start the presentation with Dr. Jiao, and then we will reserve all the questions to after finishing the 3 presentations, so you can leave the Q&A, the questions in the Q&A session, and anytime during the presentation or after. And before we formally start, and I'd like to remind a few things that attendee can see all the questions that you in a Q&A session, and you can like and thumbs up for the questions that you saw in the Q&A box. And also you can also go to PacTransConference.com and to find out more about the rest of the webinars following today and throughout the week until Thursday. And also we have virtual poster sessions as well, and those are some of the exciting sessions that other than the webinars. And without further ado, let me start by welcoming our first speaker, Dr. Junfeng Jiao from University of Texas in Austin. He's an associate professor in the urban planning, has been doing research on micromobility. And Junfeng, it's all yours.
Thank you, Haizhong. Thank you, Cole, and thank you everybody for attending this event. I actually graduated from UW, and I got funded from PacTrans, so I feel very happy to come back to share my research with all of you. So let me share my screen. Okay, to save the bandwidth, I can turn off the video and share the screen. So today, I'm gonna present some new understanding of study result about e-scooter travels in Austin, Texas. My research focus on smart city and smart transportation, urban informatics, shared mobility, and shared micromobility is one of my major focus areas. So without further ado, I will go directly to the presentation. So this is scooters. They're all over everywhere, whether you like it or not. So why should we care about the scooters? Because 50% of total trip were less than 3 miles, and 60% of trip less than 1 mile were done by automobile. That's crazy if you're living in other country or if you have some experience. So that's the market for scooter for short to medium range travels. This is done by National Health Travel Survey. Basically, you can find the detailed information there. So today I'm gonna present 2 questions. One is the spatial and temporal distribution of e-scooter in Austin. Where and when do people use scooter? Secondly, I guess you heard about the compliance, so we talked about scooter violations. So from shared mobility to shared responsibility. So this is Austin. For those of you who have not been Austin, this is actually the number 11th largest city in the US, larger than San Francisco, larger than Seattle, actually. I just learned that. Not just, I learned that a while ago, but I just want to give you this part of information. So this is where the Austin is located in the center part of Texas. From 2018 to 2019, there are 4 scooter companies operating Austin: Jump, Lyft, Bird, Lime, the major 4 players. In total, we have 14,000 scooters running in Austin between this period. This is actually our study period. So let's see the overall spatial distribution of e-scooter in Austin. So this is on your left is a total distribution of the total trips during 2018 to 2019. Each dot basically is a hexagon. I will tell you the size of hexagon later. But you can see the overall distribution. You can clearly identify 2 hotspots. One is downtown, which is in the lower part. One is UT Austin campus, which is on the upper part. On your right, you can see daily usage. Again, you see 2 hotspots, UT Austin campus and the downtown. On average, you can see the average usage for each location. In some area, the daily usage of e-scooter exceed 100 times per day. Okay, so let's zoom in to these 2 locations and see the detailed traffic flow. This analysis shows you where the e-scooter traffic was generated, where they ended. Pay attention to red hexagons. Again, let me tell you, each hexagon equal to 0.023 square miles. So it's roughly like for each side length, it's 500 feet. Each diagonal length is 10,000 feet. So you can get an idea how big a square is a hexagon. So for the red hexagon, you can see the scooter enter the zone. And for the blue hexagon, a small scooter leaving the zone. So you can see downtown generate many scooter trips leaving the downtown area. And UT campus, which is on up part of the map, receiving many scooter trips. This is just a general information. We will get a detailed information about the spatial distribution later. So again, this is a month-by-month scooter trips in the city of Austin. You can see on average, they only travel, pay attention to the last row. You see on average, they only travel 0.77 miles. On average, they only travel 70.55 minutes. On average, each month generated 160,000 trips. So this is the distribution of either travel in city of Austin. So this is the box plot for scooter travel in time and the distance. So you can see they're roughly travel time and travel distance in this area. So it's less than 1 mile and less than 10 minutes. So this is a heat map for hourly distribution of e-scooter travels. You can see most of the travel concentrated from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. in the night. We have a high density of e-scooter travel in the afternoon, start from noon till 5 p.m. So you're probably wondering how many of these scooter travel were maybe transit related? Why we want to answer this question? Because many scooter companies claim we trying to solve the first and last mile problem. We're trying to solve a transit desert problem. Are they really doing that? Let's take a close look. So how do we define transit related trips? We collect all the bus stops in city of Austin, and we generate a quarter mile buffer around all the stops. So for any scooter trip, either origin or destination, within this quarter mile buffer, we consider transit related trips. During this period, we actually collected 2 million of e-scooter trips. And according to this rule, actually half of this trip are possibly, please pay attention to here, possibly related to transit deserts. We're currently working on disentangle the relationship between e-scooter travel and bus travel. So at this stage, we can roughly say 50% of e-scooter trip are possibly transit related. So this is again the distribution of transit related e-scooter trips. Again, you see two clearly hotspots instead of Austin. One is downtown, one is UT campus. On your left, we see a map showing short trips. That means the trip distance is less than 1 mile. On your right, you're seeing long trips. That means the trip distance is longer than 1 mile. So again, this is just possibly transit-related trips. We don't know for sure. Just provided for your information only. And we cannot either agree or disagree with the scooter company argument at this stage, because we need more information to answer this question. So the second question we want to ask is how the scooter usage are related to the surrounding environment, surrounding building environment, surrounding urban environment instead of Austin. Again, this is a unit of analysis, a hexagon. Each hexagon equal to 0.023 square mile. The side length is 500 feet. So in total, we have almost 4,000 hexagons included in this study. So the total number of trips that either started or ended at each hexagon is our dependent variable. On average, we have 846 trips either ended or entered each hexagon. This is, again, this is not daily, this is not monthly, this is for the whole observation period, roughly 10 months period. For the dependent or independent variable, we have a transportation infrastructure, socioeconomic status, building environment, and many other variables. To understand the relationship between these two sets of data, we use a traditional model, connective binomial model, trying to detect the relationship. This is the result of the model. So you can see we have all the significant variable listed. I will not go in details. I will just skip this. This is the general findings. So we analyze 1.7 million scooter trips, and the average travel distance and the average travel time for each scooter trip is 0.8 miles and 8 minutes. You can think about it that way. Downtown Austin and UT Austin campus are two special has more trip generated from downtown than ended, while the opposite was true for UT campus. That means many trips ended at the UT campus than generated. So for the built-in environment variable, area with higher population density, higher education were correlated with more scooter trips. A short distance to the city center, the presence of transit stations, better street connectivity, more compact land use will also relate to more scooter usage. But the proportion of young residents within a neighborhood was negatively correlated with scooter usage. So again, this is general finding of the spatial temporal distribution of e-scooter trip in the city of Austin. So we will move to the second question. How the scooter violation being dealt within the city of Austin, and what type of violation had been reported, how they been reported. So why we care about this? Because everybody want to free and they want to convenience. So this is actually a general problem for any shared mobility. So convenient for me, but troublesome for you. I want as much possible convenience as possible. I just want to leave the trouble for you. You can see the scooter was through everywhere and it was vandalized, just parking everywhere. So this is not true. This is not only for scooter. We see this for bike share, even for other station bikes. So this is a general problem for shared micro mobility. So we have two research questions. The first one, what are the dockless mobility violations in Austin and how they being handled? The second one, where do the violation cluster in space? How do we get the data and analyze this kind of violation? Fortunately, City of Austin published 311 dataset. The 311 dataset is for non-emergency reports. Most of this report will be related to pothole or noise complaint or dead animal or scooter violations. They have 3 ways to report this 311 violation. The first one is by phone. You can just call them, call the city. The second one is go on internet, log in, and report a violation. The third one is by mobile apps. When you report a violation, we take down, not we, the City of Austin will record the timestamp, the location of the violation type, and some general descriptions. Also, we'll record the company, about the scooter company which it belongs to, and we also record the reporting method of the scooter violation. So our observation period is from April 2019 to September 2019. We actually collect 4,100 scooter-related violation reports. That's our data set. Again, this is a detailed information of each record. So overall, you can see the violation time, the period of a week, and the time of the day. You can see morning weekend as the most violation. 34% of the scooter violation were reported on weekday morning, then followed by weekday afternoon, then followed by evening weekday, then followed by morning weekend, and so on and so on. This is the ANOVA analysis. We're trying to understand how this different violation was solved. The gray line is the time of hours for each violation to be solved. For the first one, you can see for weekday morning violation, it only takes 3.22 hours to solve this violation. The next one was a weekday night. It took 12 hours to solve this violation. The longest was weekend morning. It's almost taken 2 days to solve this violation. It's 47 hours to solve this violation. So this is how many hours it takes to solve different violations, depend on the reporting time. Okay, what kind of violation they reporting? The number one violation is the sidewalk obstruction. It takes 41%. The second one is obstruction for parking lot, public property, taking 35%. Then followed by damaged device or device on private property and device in a park. So this is a general distribution of different type of violation. Let's again take a close look, see how many hours take to solve each type of violation. In this one, device on private property is the fastest to be solved. It's taking 14.28 hours. And another violation, sidewalk obstruction, is a second, it's close second. It's taking 15 hour point, 15.43 hours to solve this violation. The longest one is the device in parks. That means if you threw a scooter in parks, it's going to take 36 hours to solve this problem. Okay, how do they report the different violation? The majority, 91%, were reported by cell phone, smartphone apps. 5% were reported by phone calls, and 2% were reported by web interface. Again, let's see how many hours took to solve each type of violation. In this one, clearly, phone call is the most efficient way to solve scooter violation. It only takes 3 hours to solve it. The longest way is the web interface. It's taking almost 19 hours. Smartphone app reporting take 17 hours to solve any scooter violation. Okay, this is funny one. This is interesting one. Which company is not doing so well? Which company has the most scooter violations? Bird has 29% of violation, followed by Lime, 28%. Then followed by Jump, then followed by Lyft. I want to especially ask you pay attention to this kind of table. If you work for a city, if a scooter company want to come to your city, take a close look. Okay, which company is most efficient to solve their scooter violation? Jump is a good company. It's only take 10.59 hours to solve their problem. Which company take the longest? Lime. It take more than 1 day to solve their violations. Again, this data set is only based on 311 call. So that's our limited sample size. But based on this limited sample size, this is how efficient each company solve their scooter violations. All right, the second question is trying to understand how this different violation concentrated in space. I will not go in detail about this table. So this is a close look of different violations where they concentrated. This is downtown Austin. We have a river. Along the river, you also have a lot of parks. And you can see different violations concentrated along the river and near downtown. Let's zoom in. So we have some violation on the university campus area. We also have some violation in the Zucker Park near the downtown, and we have a lot of violation in downtown area. Okay, this is another quantified spatial analysis of their distribution. So for UT campus, we have a low response time cluster with a few high response time cluster at the center. So basically that means if you report a problem at UT, so usually they will solve this very quickly. Downtown, low response cluster and outlier near high response time outlier along the river bank. So on the river bank, it's mixed. So depend on the company, depend on your reporting method. Sometimes it takes a long time to solve, sometimes it's solved very quickly. So how do we do this? Because everybody wants to convenience, but everybody just want to convenience themselves. So we have 3 parties in this process: city manager, public people who use scooter, and the scooter companies. I propose a relationship between these 3 stakeholders. They should work together to addressing this last mile problem or scooter usage problem. When public generate knowledge, they report to the city. City should oversee adjustment, and oversee the operation of scooter companies. A scooter company should work with the public, basically trying to educate them. Okay, you guys should not just convenience yourself, you should consider others, and don't throw scooter away at your convenient time or location. So findings. This result should sidewalk and public space obstruction were the two most frequently reported violations in the city of Austin. Improperly parked vehicle in parks require longest time to be cleaned. 91% was submitted from smartphone apps, compared to only 5% by phone call or 2% from web interface. But it takes the longest time to solve the complaint submitted by smartphone apps. It takes almost 18 hours to solve a smartphone report versus a telephone call, only 2.5 hours. GIS hotspot analysis showed the university campus and downtown were both violation cluster, but the university campus was solved more quickly. Okay, so should we do it or not? This is a good question. I don't know the answer. It's all up to everybody here. So this is a research team. I've done this research with my two PhD students, and we get support from CM2, University Transportation Center at UT Austin. Also, we get a support from Go System Grant Challenge. Also, we get a support from Texas UT Austin. We have published 3 peer-reviewed papers related to this presentation. If you're interested, you can find them from Journal of Urban Affairs, Travel Behavior Society, Journal of International Journal of Geoinformation. So thanks all of you. Let's keep scooter good, and thank you for your listening.
Thank you, Junfeng, for your excellent presentation. We have a few questions lined up already, but like I said earlier, we will reserve the questions that after all the 3 presentations. Without further delay, and let me invite our second speaker today, Mr. Tobias Marx from City of Bend, and he will share about the micromobility development in Bend. He's the Parking Service Division Manager for City of Bend. Welcome, Toby. It's all yours.
Thank you so much. Great to be here, and I'm going to share my screen with you all real quick. And then I will start. So from Austin to Bend. So welcome to Bend in beautiful Bend in Central Oregon. My presentation for today is entitled Micromobility in Bend Now, but Not Yet. And to give you a little bit more context about that, starting by sharing a little bit about our challenges to create an equitable shared micromobility program in a place where everyone enjoys the outdoors, loves to build community, and is really busy doing so. So let's get going. To give you a little bit more food for thought, Bend has grown in population to about 100,000 people. We are a little bit more than that, and we assume that we are at 130,000 people very, very quickly. We were recently named by Wallet Hub as the 2nd fastest growing city in the USA. We are a top destination here at the West Coast for outdoor recreations. We are also one of the most entrepreneurial cities in the US. As far as it relates to our municipal government, we currently have 74 active innovation projects being implemented simultaneously across our local government. And we are in the midst of passing a new 119 million Geo Bond to fund
Toby?
Yeah.
Sorry for the interruption. There are some background noise on your side. I wonder if you can quickly check and for the quality of the presentation. Yes, much better.
Oh, better now?
There's still background noise.
Okay. It looks good on my end for my laptop for everything. I don't see what else I can do. I can switch my, do you want me to switch my headphones?
The noise is actually louder now.
To be my fan in my laptop, I just started to make an extremely loud noise. I'm not sure how I can turn that off, but I can try just with my headset. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Is it a little bit better now?
It's kind of on and off.
Yeah.
It's much better now, but once you speak, I think it's so. We have one attendee, Jennifer, mentioned this could be the computer fan.
It's a computer fan. I can hear it, but I'm not sure what I can do about it. Just waiting for it to turn off, I guess.
Yeah, if you try, Cesar suggests that you try and choose an external mic.
I did. Let me see. Yeah, I can see. I can go in there a little bit more and do that. If it doesn't turn off, if it turns off in a second, maybe it gets better. Otherwise, it's probably going to take me a while to fix it. What would you like me to do?
I'm not sure how long it takes for this. The noise is actually is getting much lower now.
So, should we just continue that?
Yeah, let's go move forward.
Okay. Back to where I was. So, I think I just finished talking about like our new GeoBond to find. You want to continue or start?
I'm trying to quickly check if there's a phone number that you can call in so that we can filter that noise that way. Why not, Toby? Let's give the presentation to Joel, and then reserve you to present in the third place. Sorry about that, and let's try to deliver that presentation clearly. So sorry for the equipment problem, and we did test, and the testing was fine. So let me invite Mr. Joe Miller. He's the Micromobility Program Manager, Program Lead from City of Seattle Department of Transportation. And Joe, it's all yours now.
Great. Thanks so much, everybody. So yeah, I'm Joel Miller. I work with the Seattle Department of Transportation. I'm actually in Twist, Washington right now on a little mini vacation, working half days. So kind of on the eastern slope of the North Cascades. And I might also have technical difficulties. The internet here is slower than I would have liked, but it seemed to work in our test, and so I'm just gonna hop into it and probably turn off my camera, but go ahead and share my screen. So yes, let's see here, stop video. Okay, so I'm just gonna talk about kind of what we've been doing here in Seattle, and where we think this might be going. So kind of less detail than probably the Austin transportation, more just kind of big picture. So I'll give a little bit of history because I think that's really interesting about what we've done in the past with bike share and now scooter share. A little bit of the very urgent challenges that we're facing and that we're facing with launching scooters. We just launched scooters this past month. Some of our strategies for some of the issues that were brought up in Austin, and then kind of how we're thinking about next steps. So a little brief history. Seattle had an old-fashioned dock-based bike system, and is one of the only ones that failed, or the earlier ones that failed for a major city. We had Pronto, and that was back in 2014, and it ran to 2017. And for a lot of reasons, Pronto failed. A lot of them were political, but it was an underperforming system. It didn't really serve the whole city. It didn't even really serve the whole kind of central part of the city. The station density wasn't good enough so that people could rely on it, depend on it. And so it was just kind of a system that wasn't seeing great usage. And so in the spring of 2017, it went away. Our mayor and city council essentially pulled funding and canceled bike share. So in spring of 2017, Seattle was probably the largest major city without any kind of bike share program. That timing was fortuitous in a lot of ways, and that this is also when vendors were looking to launch this new free floating system that no one had really heard of except for some cities in China. And we said, hey, let's try it. Let's set up a permitting structure where we can permit these private vendors to come here. That'll be a very different, just right off out of the gate, different than kind of the procurement method we and other cities use for dock-based bike share. We could regulate the operations, collect fees, collect data, and see if we could run this at no cost to the city. So we launched that in July 2017. We did a pilot. We analyzed that. We passed legislation and did an environmental review. And in 2018, we kind of launched our permanent program. There was changes in those times. And in our pilot, we launched with those 3 bikes that you see on the slide there. That's Lime, Ofo, and Spin. By the time we moved to our permanent program, Lime was still around offering e-bikes instead of standard bikes. Jump had entered the market and got a Seattle permit for their e-bikes. And then, and actually, interesting little known fact, Lyft also got a permit, but never actually launched for their e-bikes. And then we've iterated on that, and now we are also launching a scooter pilot. So that's a brief history of where we are in Seattle. This is a slide I don't think I need to dig into too deep for you. This is something we shared with City Council, but just letting folks know, hey, scooter share operates like our bike share has operated. So we're in kind of a unique situation here in Seattle where we've had a free floating bike share situation well, situation, I guess is good, program for a couple years. And so scooter share, people are kind of familiar with how it runs. They'll be free floating. There'll be a 15-mile-an-hour limit, and these should be parked in the same way in a paved furniture zone, in a bike rack, or a bike corral. I do want to call out that lower photo of the seated scooter, what we're calling. And that's something that we're really interested in Seattle as well, kind of a scooter that might have bigger wheels, a lower center of gravity. I know a lot of cities claim this, but we do really feel like we have pavement condition struggles in Seattle. We have some pretty iffy weather and a lot of hills. And so we really liked, okay, maybe something with bigger wheels, lower center of gravity might work well for us. This is a photo of our city traffic engineer, Dongo Chang, trying one of the seated style scooters a year ago. So going into kind of why now, why we think scooters and continuing to invest in bike share is important during COVID-19. No question, it's changed how people get around the cities. It's reduced demand, at least initially, for a lot of travel. A lot of folks that were working aren't working in their offices now. They're working from home. A lot of other jobs have gone away. And it's transformed how cities are temporarily functioning. Our downtown core, kind of the commercial core, where our offices are, I'll go in every couple months to get something out of my office, and it's still empty down there. Empty, obviously, being a bit of an exaggeration. It's not empty, but compared to before, it was empty. But scooters have been seeing different uses as well. Studies in Portland and Detroit and Baltimore showing that people are using scooters for different style of trips after COVID, that they're going for longer trips and they're more likely to be used for essential trips. That's really interesting to us. Portland did a great partnership with Spin and lowered the price of some of their trips, and they saw that with that there's a 46% increase in usage in some of their low-income neighborhoods. And then as the summer it crept from spring to summer and people got a little more used to the pandemic, we did see pretty good usage in a lot of US cities. And finally, climate. I think we lose track of this other impending disaster that's coming, but it is coming, and we've seen now that there's some interesting data about how people are using scooters and what kind of trips are replacing. So I put on this slide historically about 25% of scooter trips replace car trips. That's probably a conservative estimate. Cities and surveys are showing anywhere from this 25 to even more like a third, 33% of trips are replacing car trips. That's similar to what we see in free floating bike share. Our survey showed about a third of trips replacing a trip someone would have taken in a private car or a TNC or car share. So when you're seeing millions of trips, last year we saw 2.2 million bike share trips. That's a really significant carbon savings and reduction in congestion and pollution and then the impacts to carbon. Scooters can also, in Seattle specifically, a Fair and Piers and Lime study showed that it could replace about 175,000 car trips a month and 85 metric tons of CO2. And so this is all really interesting. We know that doesn't answer all the questions. We don't really know what the carbon impacts of scooter share are, driving around, rebalancing, replacing batteries, the life cycle analysis of these programs. So one thing that we are proposing with our scooter share pilot this year is to collect the data to do a Seattle specific full environmental impact analysis, so we gain some of those other understandings. That's kind of big picture stuff. I do want to talk about some of the strategies that cities are taking to address a lot of those issues like we talked about in Austin. And one big thing is pedestrian safety. So cities are, permitting these operations, but we do have a lot of regulatory tools. And so I'll go over kind of what we're doing in Seattle that, although we're not operating these, we're just permitting, we've built in these tools into our program. The existing Seattle Municipal Code says you can't ride on the sidewalks. We didn't change that. The existing municipal code before scooters also said you couldn't ride a scooter in a bike lane or on a bike trail. We went ahead and changed that to say, okay, you can pretty much ride a scooter like a bike, except for you can't ride a scooter on the sidewalk. You need to still park in the furniture zone or at a bike rack. Those sort of same rules. You can't park it right in the middle of the sidewalk. You can't park it at a bus stop or blocking a curb ramp or a building entrance. So we built those same rules in that we have in bike share. We are going to continue to build parking corrals. This photo on the right shows one of the larger parking corrals that we built using bike share permit fees. Actually, most of the corrals that we built last year, we built about 150 of them, are smaller than this, but they're in the street and they're in that parking lane kind of right next to a crosswalk. So not only do they add great capacity for bike and scooter share, but they also serve to kind of protect the crosswalk a little more. With adding a corral in the street, you're lessening the exposed crossing distance and you're tightening the turn radius, so cars need to slow down a little more when they're navigating through our city streets. So we're going to continue to build those parking corrals, and again, that's all funded by the revenue we bring in with scooter share permits. Used to be bike share permits. Now, and I'll talk about this a little more, but the market shifted and we can't generate the same bike share revenue, but we can do that with scooters. We can geofence areas to say you can't park in these certain areas. Now, it's not working yet. The tech's not there to say, hey, in this parking corral you can park, but 4 feet away on the sidewalk you can't. But you can say, hey, a city park, a movable bridge, kind of a large block face where there's issues, don't park there, and not allow trips to end in those areas. One thing that we're really focusing on this year is more education. We saw that through bike share, although some people may read kind of all the pop-ups that you get on an app that says the rules and some of the tips for being a safe user, most people will just swipe through that. I think that's just human behavior. You want to kind of get to the good stuff. So one thing that we're mandating this year is that for scooter and bike share, vendors generate a short quiz that users have to take. Whether that's in the app or something that's digital and emailed, they have to take it within their first few rides and every few months thereafter. And so that just kind of slows people down, and let's make sure that they're actually thinking about how they ride, how they park, how it might affect other people, and how they stay in compliance. Much like Austin and a lot of other cities, we've integrated reporting into our own city reporting systems. That's called the Find It, Fix It app or 684 Road. We don't have like a 311 system like other cities, but that allows the public to report maintenance issues, improperly parked devices. We collect that data and automatically route that to the vendors so that they can go fix it, and we track how long it takes them. And then finally, one thing that we've been doing in Seattle for the last couple of years is auditing, and really heavy audits. We're out there probably multiple times a week with our staff. I'll go out and do them as well. And we look at how these are parked, not just where the complaints are, which has huge equity implications, but how they actually are parked across the city and how they're maintained. And we'll catalog every device we come across in a certain area and come up with some metrics. And in the past, we're using those metrics to reduce vendor fleets or potentially fine them. This year, we've decided, hey, we are going to fine the user. We'll do that through the vendor, but we're going to issue small fines, $20 for improperly parked devices that the vendors have to pass along to the rider. We're asking that they give each rider a warning first, and that people that are using low-income plans don't get a fine. They just get warnings and other kind of actions down the road that aren't financial. So these are all strategies that we're using to say, hey, yes, we're permitting private operations, but we need to proactively address a lot of these issues in those permit requirements and some of the levers that we have. We're doing a lot of the same stuff for rider safety. I'm not going to go as in depth into this, but one thing is we saw that a lot of crashes that were happening that were injuring people were happening on someone's first ride or first few rides. So we're saying, hey, that first ride in Seattle, a lot of these users are going to be brand new, and maybe 15 miles an hour isn't the great top speed for their first ride. So it's slow down that first ride to 8 miles an hour. So that's a new requirement in our scooter permit, and we're interested to see how that affects safety. Finally, going to go into just what kind of program we've designed, and revisit that sort of scooter design question I brought up earlier. First of all, we know that we're depending on private operators that are largely funded by venture capital to operate these systems. And in the past, we were able to collect a lot of permit revenue for this free-floating bike share system. Well, that market shifted and it went to scooter share. But we didn't want to abandon bike share. We knew that we had a lot of people that depend on it, a lot of people that like bike share. And so we said, okay, let's make a scooter permit for someone, a vendor that's also going to operate bike share, and that way they'll have an easier time competing for that permit. And so that's what we've done. There's one permit slot is for a bike share operator that's also doing scooters. That way we're preserving bike share and seeing how it also works with a vendor that offers multiple options. We also really wanted to try that seated scooter. So we made a permit slot for them. We said, hey, one of these slots is going to be for a vendor that operates only seated scooters. And we're going to study that, see if they're safer, see if they're less likely to be ridden on the sidewalk, see how competitive they are, if people like them, or if they really just like the standing scooter. And then finally, a third permit slot for your typical standing scooter type. And so we're going to look at this. There is a fourth permit for some prototype. It's smaller. It can't be part of an initial launch. It's just kind of a back pocket thing that we have if there's a really interesting development that we want to try in the next permit year. But we really wanted to focus on a seated scooter, a vendor that operated both, and then kind of have a third permit slot for another vendor to come operate in Seattle. We do a lot with these permit fees. We charge $150 per scooter to these companies, and with that we're able to fund all of the program support, so all of my time, the audits, the evaluation work, the data work, that's all funded by permit fees, so this is still free to the city. It also supports increased parking. So yeah, last year we built about 150 new parking corrals. We want to keep building those this year. We want to do a lot of really focused equity and outreach work in Seattle's low-income communities, but particularly communities of color and Black communities in the city. And then finally, Outdoors for All, I want to take a second to plug this because I love the work that they do so much. They are a adaptive sports nonprofit in the city, and they have one of the largest fleets of adaptive cycles. So those are bicycles, tricycles, other styles of bikes essentially that are built specifically for people with disabilities that can't ride a typical bicycle. We know that bike share and scooter share doesn't work for everyone. We're really hopeful that the seated style scooter will work for more people, but we also want to make sure that this is benefiting people that can't get on those devices. And so we've been able to take permit revenue and fund a partnership with Outdoors for All that makes the rentals of these cycles completely free for people that have disabilities. And we saw in not this past summer because of COVID, but the summer before, that by making it free and by keeping them open 7 days a week, we were able to increase usage of those adaptive cycles by about 400%. So really, really excited about that. And then finally, what's next? So we're operating the scooter share program. We're going to evaluate it. We're going to look at where it was used, how it was used, what kind of trips were people using it for? Were they using it for differently than bike share? Were seated style used differently than standing style? What was the safety impacts? What were the equity impacts? Was our equity requirements that we built in, were they enough? And so we'll evaluate all that to then determine, hey, what does a future micromobility program look like? Right now, we permit bikes and scooters separately, but maybe that's not the answer in the future. Maybe a system where a city is just permitting private operators and they turn over every year and they're kind of at the whim for what venture capital might be investing in. Maybe that's not sustainable economically or really environmentally. So how does a city approach this to make a future program that's sustainable, that's equitable, and then also reliable and convenient? And I think those are two other things that we've seen in Seattle. We saw bike share essentially leave twice now. One thing I left on that brief history was that when Jump ceased operations and they were passed to Lime this past spring, we lost bike share again for the second time, just for a couple months. But people grow to depend on these things. We also permit car share, and Car2Go and Reach Now left Seattle. We have a new one now, but we heard from people that said, hey, I sold a car. I moved to this neighborhood that doesn't have parking because I thought car share was an option. I made some like really positive life changes that are more sustainable because of car share and because of bike share. And if cities are just relying on venture capital, essentially, and capitalism to offer these transportation options, is that reliable? Is that convenient? Is it equitable? And is it sustainable? So we're going to look at all of those questions to see, hey, how should the city approach this, and make some recommendations from there. Not saying we'll be able to do anything. I know budgets are going to have a huge impact this next year, but we want to look at what's the best way to approach this in a longer term that's really meeting our city's goals. And that's what I have. So yeah, I will pass it back.
Well, thank you, Joel, very much for your presentation. Excellent. And let's invite Toby back from Central Oregon. Toby? Hey, Toby, can you hear me? Well, Toby is setting up, and so
Can you
feel
hear me
free.
now?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, great.
So, no
Okay,
noise.
so let's
Great.
try.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, well, the fan perfectly stopped doing Joel's presentation, so looking into that later. So let's try this again. Let me bring my screen up and go through that. So welcome again to beautiful Bend in Central Oregon. I'll go through this one more time. I hope this time everybody can hear me a little bit better. I apologize for that. Before I started hearing the fan and I'm like, this is starting again. I had that problem a couple months ago and then it went away. So my presentation is slightly different than that wealth of information that we got from the other two, just because we are in the process of creating a pilot program for micromobility that can be good, and we are suffering through a lot of challenges in the process of making that happen. That's why I named this presentation Micromobility in Bend Now, but Not Yet. Basically, again, it's about our challenge to create an equitable shared micromobility program in a place where everyone enjoys the outdoors, loves to build community, and is really busy doing so. So I went through a little bit of the food for thought, so I skip this quick and go to the last point on this one, where we're in the process of, we have a bond on our November ballot for a $190 million transportation system plan that includes a lot of new transportation modes and directions, and that's very exciting for us. And so how does it all relate to this? That's where it becomes interesting. So I came to Bend in November 2019. I moved here from the Boston area in Massachusetts, and we moved over here last summer. And I was hired to do parking services division, and within a couple of weeks, the city of Bend completely restructured, and we started to form a transportation and mobility department. Shortly later, our bike share tanked with Dexter going out of business. Everybody at the time talked about micromobility as we are reducing parking requirements, new development areas, new opportunity areas that we want to connect citywide. It becomes something that we're all very interested about, but nobody really has the bandwidth to do it or to own it. We have a bunch of stakeholders that really want it, but don't really want it because they all are have shaped their opinions based on the terrible stories of like devices ending in rivers, being scattered, and like creating hazards all over the place, so to speak. And I'm quoting some comments a little bit here, but they want it, but they are not really 100% in favor of it. And so there's really more across our stakeholders in the city of Bend, not only internally, but also externally, a little bit of a hands-off approach. So then COVID-19 happened. So we're actually like in the process of engaging stakeholders again. We are saying, hey, can we do something here? Can we expand our offering? Can we move from, now that Dexter is gone and we have the stationary bike share, can we go to dockless? And everybody's like, well, why would you even do this now, right? Like with a pandemic. And so we work with OSU and our mobility lab and to really try to find an approach to our stakeholders to say, right now is the perfect time to investigate how micromobility can be advanced in Bend and can be a real benefit, mainly because we know that there will be a healthier world hopefully coming out of this, and we can find a way to get a more equitable approach to transportation, especially in non-connected areas from our transit system. We want to be better, provide a more resilient and preparedness for like people that might not otherwise be affordable to find their way around. And we want to promote a lot of different travel options, especially as a result of social distancing. And so we really came to review what we have done, and we wanted to build on the success of the bike share that we had before it tanked. And so to give you an overview, and this is like a big contrast to the 14,000 scooters that were that were on this road in Austin, Texas. We had 55 bikes across 7 locations, and those counted for about 11,000 trips since 2016. So it's not necessarily a big program, but we feel it was successful for Bend. And so now we're in the process right now to really balance the concerns and the solutions to establish a new program. We want to create a program, and we don't want vendors to set the rules. So that means we don't want to be at the liberty of the vendors. We don't want to be at the liberty of when they're closing down, what are we doing then? Or that they can just think they can bring as many scooters as they want or as many bikes as they want. We want to really create a program that's solid and that keeps all the concerns of our stakeholders and community members on their mind before. We want to create a smaller program that limits the geographic area, and really important here, define and enforce the boundaries where devices can be used. And we now start to talk about devices more than individual like devices, really more all-encompassing, instead of just saying we just want to do a bike share or we just want to have a scooter share. We tend to have this little conflict going on. And I'm sharing this all, I know, a little bit more like how we really feel about this. So it's a little bit more maybe casual in my conversation with you guys right now, in my monologue, that we have a whole bunch of people that own e-bikes already. And so the question is, like, from some people, why would they have a bike share? But scooters, they would be interested, or a car share, they would be interested. So when we talk about devices, we really encompassing everything. We want to limit the use to city greenways and city streets. Definitely prohibit sidewalk riding. And then we're creating, within this pilot program, designated zones and areas for drop-off and pickup. And that's mainly to really help some of our stakeholders to participate that are afraid that they have a shopping center and devices would be left all over the place. So we feel creating designated parking areas for devices would be helpful for that. We want to include micromobility hubs, and this is a huge part of this transportation plan that I mentioned in the beginning, where in partnership with the Transit Authority, we're building larger mobility hubs, but we also want to create small micromobility hubs that we can connect to our parking system, that we then can offer this last mile trips as an incentive for people to park, maybe not in the downtown core where we really get very busy these days, even after COVID-19, and where we really have a limited parking demand. We actually want to work on a program with our vendors where we offer relocation grace periods. And so that would then work together with enforcement of devices that left in prohibited areas. And so what we're looking into are solutions that can say, how can we enforce? And this is like probably more for me being in parking and dealing with parking enforcement every day. How can we enforce a device that's left in an area where it didn't belong? And how can we incentivize or encourage the vendor to move that device as fast as possible? And from the first presentation, I think everybody saw that in Austin, it took a while sometimes, like 15 hours or longer for like devices to be reset. How can we find a system that doesn't happen and that is done within an hour? And so one solution that we're looking at is to actually say that if a device is left outside a mobility hub or outside a designated zone, after a 20 or 30-minute grace period for that device to be moved again, a parking session would start that actually charges the vendor, not the user, a hourly fee until the device is moved. And we hope that is something, we have seen it in some pilots that were done in different cities, and we feel that will be something that could work here. And it's definitely something that gave some peace of mind to some of our stakeholders. We want to focus on safety, so we are planning on partnering similar to what Joel talked about in Seattle with like local nonprofits that are good at doing community outreach, to have programs that would educate people before about how to safely ride whichever device that is. We want to work on having a daily reset for deployed scooters or devices, that we make sure we put them back where they belong every night, not just at the end of the week or at the end of the month. And we want to have a very active weekly data analysis that we can actually see what's actually our ridership, where they come from, where do they go, what's the highest traffic situation here, and how can we adjust that on an ongoing basis. So where do we go from here? Well, as I mentioned, we currently do not have a determined start date for a shared micromobility program, but we are, one way or the other, we'll launch a program in spring 21. We actually have 3 directions that we are entertaining right now to go. One will be like pretty much like it's done in most cities, like find a vendor that wants to do what we want them to do and have a permit application for that, have a fee for that, and let them come and operate. Or our second option, which we're actually a little bit excited about, is that there's a statewide effort right now in the state of Oregon to potentially have a nonprofit operating a statewide bike share program that also then could include other micromobility options. And that is something that we think is very interesting. Or do it Bend style. And Bend style, as being an entrepreneurial city, would mean that what if we're doing it ourselves? What if we, from the Transportation Mobility Department, set up the structure, invest in the software, invest in the setup, but then partner with local bike shops, local partners to operate a micromobility program. To say, look, if you have 4 or 5 bike shops that each purchase a certain amount of devices and are responsible for that, we could be the ones that's setting it up. We could have a team that is operating it, and we could share the responsibilities for maintenance and redistribution and all those other things with them. And that's an idea that we feel is very interesting too. So it's really more like a co-op idea to operating a bike share, but I don't have the crystal ball to look ahead at how it actually ends up and what we're actually doing. I only know that it has been a challenge. It has been an interesting ride, and somehow we are operating a bike share or micromobility program by spring 21. And yeah, I wish I could share more with you, but that's really all we got at this time. But I hope that next year there would be more to tell you about that.
Excellent, Toby. Thank you very much for sharing the development of the micromobility program in Bend. So that concludes our 3 excellent presentations. Well, we have some questions in the Q&A, so feel free to ask more questions if you have over there. And our session is, about designed as 75 minutes. So we have roughly about, that's around 5-6 minutes for Q&A, because we have some delays earlier. And I wonder, there is a question from Don. Is that question that you addressed to Joel Ray? I think it's, so Joe has answered one of the questions already. Joe?
Yeah, yeah, Don had I think a great question that probably could go to more than me, but it was about, I'll just read it. Does it make more sense for the city to subsidize more sustainable options like car sharing and micromobility, or to ask less sustainable options to pay their full cost? Wouldn't the market do a better job of providing micromobility and car sharing and transit if cars weren't receiving the fat subsidies that they do in the forms of free access to roads, on-street parking, all that is priced below market rates and largely subsidized? And Don makes a great point. That's an easy answer. Yes, that would make more sense and would be more effective and respond more to the market. I think right now, one of the things I've learned quickest in working in this field versus previously for the Department of Transportation, I worked as a kind of a bike pedestrian planner, helping with the neighborhood greenways program. But the role of politics in this, like, these panels don't really talk about it enough. And that's probably because there's not a lot we can do. We all like to kind of stay in the realm where we have a lot of control. But what cities should do and what cities do are often different, and planners and folks that work in academia and all that often know better. But when politicians are responding to the most powerful and to the people that have the most power, or just to voters that might not be thinking about all the options, or in a way that we do, or that's been presented to them like we think about it, you get different answers. And so Don, those are great questions. I would love to do that. Right now I think I could control kind of my little area and try and see if I can talk about pulling some funding in. But no, that's very true, and I'd be interested in what other folks think.
We have one more question, new question in the Q&A, and from Sam. Could reducing scooter speed 8 mph versus 15 initially for new users reduce utility for those users and lower long-term uses overall?
Yeah, looks like that's another question for me. Yeah, that's a very real concern. One of our city council members asked me essentially the opposite question, which was, if we think slowing to 8 is going to make this safer for the first use, why don't we do it for the first 3 or the first 5 uses? And it was that concern that I kind of brought up in response to that council member. It was that we're fighting, or we're trying to offer this as an option that's not people getting in an Uber or a Lyft. And if people take that first ride and it's 8 miles an hour, the screen tells them, hey, this is 8 miles an hour, and they should get a pop-up, and that your next ride will be better. But if after a couple tries they think, hey, this is too slow, they're just going to call a Lyft. And so I am concerned that the 8 mile an hour first ride will lessen some utility, and people will try it once, not realize that it was that slow only for their first ride, and then just abandon it and call Uber or Lyft after that. But we're really trying to balance that with also, so many of these riders are new, and maybe not even riders that generally ride a bike before that. And so there is a really big concern about the learning curve and about safety and head injuries. And so we're trying to balance those two competing concerns, and really just educate people that after that first ride, it should be a more convenient option.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So we have another question from Dr. Haizhong Wang. How is the shared micromobility going to affect travel mode split in long run? It will start with Toby and then Joel.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I have a good answer, but I think my experience here and before too has been that I think that really depends on how we implement. I think that if we're confident in what we're doing and actually also have a little bit more like, let's just do it and get it done attitude, we probably can affect it much better than if we're hesitant in applying something. And I think what I mean with that is kind of like echoing a little bit what Joel said. We're a little bit often at the liberty at like policymakers, right? Which direction they want to go, and then whose ear do they have? And I think that's something definitely that can affect like stuffers, like people that want to get something done. For me, in my ideal world, and also again related to parking, like it sounds maybe crazy because parking is what I do, but we want to get people out of the cars into other things. We want to free up space for more safe modes. We want to free up space for pedestrians. And so I think we need a strong approach from ourselves to implement these programs confident and being really with the ability and the willingness to make failures that we can correct down the road. And that I think if we're doing that right, I think we can see a shift in travel mode from like out of the car into that, maybe even out of transit onto devices. And I just think it really needs like comprehensive and holistic approaches that we are willing to touch and try out and like, for lack of better terms, to play around with.
Excellent. Do you have anything to add, Joel?
Toby kind of said it all. I agree with everything he said. It depends a lot on how we implement. I do think that there is a lot of potential there, and reiterate that. I think the scooter paradigm, I mean, I ride bikes, I've ridden bikes. I think a lot of us probably on this call like have done that, and maybe not fully understand the impacts of scooters. But I think in the cities that have tried it, they're seeing that people that don't imagine themselves as bike riders and don't kind of take on that already very established identity here in the US, are willing to try scooters. And I think that's really where a lot of the potential of scooters or seated devices that have a throttle really can start to change that narrative to that people want to try these other options. And then it's to the cities to respond, both to allow it to happen in a responsible way, but keeping devices capped at like artificially really small levels will never kind of unlock the potential. But at the same time, we need to think about how we allocate space in the right of way, how we're if we give 60 feet of a road to fast moving cars and 10 feet to pedestrians, and you think, hey, why aren't scooters working? Well, that's a big reason why. We need space. And so I think those two kind of interests will have a lot to say about whether this shifts mode.
Well, thank you both. And I forgot to mention earlier that one of our panelists, Dr. Junfeng Jiao, he has to leave early and for another meeting. And he answered some of the all the questions that I posted to him. So if you have further questions to him, feel free to reach out to him. And we don't have more live questions, but I do actually have a very quick question for, specifically for Toby. And, I know that you're sharing that the City of Bend is going to launch a program and in the near future. And in the process, there were a lot of challenges and and also opportunities. If another city, say for example, similar size and similar setting in terms of the population, and maybe also have college town type, and what are some of the successful or tips or or lessons learned you can share with them that if they are planning also launching a program?
Yeah, I think that the lesson learned, and this is probably going to sound really terrible, but the lesson learned is don't listen too much. Because I think that, especially like in Bend, where we're doing everything community-based, right? A lot. So we really want to engage stakeholders. We want to engage our community in the process. And that's good. That's really important. But I think you need to time the moment where you say, okay, now I've heard it all. And now I really need to plan something and present something. And so what we did, which I think, to put a little bit more, like to underline it a little bit more. So the process started in like 2018, that when the bike share was still working, it was with Zexter that all worked well, and people started to think about like scooters, and then started to create this big stakeholder group to see what we can do here. That ended nowhere, because nobody could come over the obstacles, right? We could address them, we could address the concerns, but there was no real solution. And so when my friend Casey from OSU and I started like touching this again and talking about it again, we said we had to make a decision. Do we include people right away from the beginning or not? And we decided, let's not do that, because we pretty much already know what they want to say, right? We've done the research, we've asked the questions. So now let's actually look at that, build a program, and let's present that. And so we recently held, like 2 weeks ago, convened like the stakeholder group again, and we presented to them what we were thinking and how we addressed the concerns and what the potentials are and how we would really pretty much had a solution and an answer to any concern that they expressed before. And so now we moved from well, we really don't think this is a good idea, to like, we're hesitantly positive, right? So we shifted the conversation and the culture a little bit, I think, which is exactly that what we needed, so that we can now ask them, hey, can you give us a letter of support that we then can take to our leadership and say, look, this is what we want to do. This is how it's going to look. These are the people we have on board. This is the area. And it really, I think often we are not confident enough to actually move something through. And I think that results in us being too overly complicated and like what we need to do before we actually come to a program, right? And I think that in a more innovative approach, maybe we only have 50% figured out, but be okay with that because we know that the remaining 50% we figure out as we start and go, because we're setting up the program not as being the 100% perfect solution. And if it fails, we close it. No, we're actually starting it knowing that we're willing to make failures, that something is not going to be perfect. But when we figure out the better solution, we adapt it right away, we adjust it right away, and then move forward.
Well, thank you, Toby. With that, let me just say, how appreciative, for all the three speakers and all the attendee that are for the session today. And I think this is a new topic and emerging. There's a lot of opportunity and challenges at the same time. I'm sure that we'll have many more discussions and conversations on this topic. And we won't be able to applaud physically for all for the speakers but let me say this, thank you all very much for your time, and please enjoy the rest of the webinars in the next few days from the PacTrans annual meeting this year. Thank you very much and have a great week.